Animorphs fans, and welcome back to the Animorphs universe. We're looking at another one of the TV show episodes today. It's episode 6 and it's called The Message, and of course it is based on book 4, The Message. First thing, it's a bit strange how the TV series episodes are titled. The last episode, for example, was based entirely on the book The Visitor, book 2, and yet it was named Between Friends. So this one is based purely on book 4 and it's named after book 4. So it just seems a bit arbitrary that the people who did the show thought, oh, we'll name them after the books, except in some cases where we'll change the name completely. It just seems a bit inconsistent. It would have probably been better if they just stuck to the book titles, which you'd say, you know, like episode 4, On the Run, which is just it's not based on any books. You could name it something like the bollocks, I don't know. But anyway, minor quibble aside. Episode 6, The Message. So yeah, based purely on book 4, The Message, which, spoiler alert, is where they find Axe. So in the book, Cassie and Tobias receive these mysterious messages, and they figure out that it's coming from under the sea, where eventually they find part of the crashed dome ship that Alfangor came from, and they find his younger brother Axe. Let's see how the TV series presents this plot. We start off with Tobias hunting through the skies over a bit of woodland, and though this may seem trivial at first, it actually brings up a very good point later on in the episode. Cassie is out here in the woods. Now we don't know that at first, we just see a hawk chasing this rabbit. And we're not supposed to know that this is Cassie and Tobias until suddenly, whew. Now it strikes me as strange that the director thought it a good idea to have Tobias's hawk screaming at the top of its lungs for the entire duration of this scene. If a rabbit were in the middle of a field here and it heard that, it would probably run. You see the big ears on these things? They can hear things quite well. So if it heard Tobias screeching at the top of his lungs for as long as he did, then it wouldn't have just sat there doing nothing. And obviously it's Cassie, so she probably hears a hawk, so she's probably sending out thought-speak signals. But just like in the previous episode, where if there's a cat on screen, there's gotta be stock meow noises, because otherwise the audience would just forget that an animal exists. It's the same thing here, they just think, there's a hawk, so hawk noise, hawk noise, hawk noise, hawk noise! We don't need it. It actually ruins the scene a little bit, just like in the cat example from last time. There's also something else I want to point out here, and it's something that happens a few times in this episode, where it tries to drag things out. For example, here, there is a total of 7 seconds from looking at Tobias flying overhead, panning down to the rabbit. 7 whole seconds of nothing on the screen. You've got Tobias flying overhead. It's a crappy green screen, by the way. He's just sort of jaggedly floating across the screen. And then there's a full 7 seconds of panning down to the rabbit. And there's a lot of wasted time in this episode, and this is just the first example. Anyway, we get that moment of Cassie just escaping Tobias by crying out in thought-speak just as he's about to hit, and she demorphs. Of course, this being a Cassie-based book, the episode is also based largely around Cassie, so she has an opening monologue. Problem is, it's pretty boring and nothing really important is said. I am being a little bit unfair there, because part of her monologue is, the Yeerks are a bit like us in that they seek their prey. But that is surface level Cassie, and then it just, that's gone. we never explore that further. We never explore the idea of humans and Yeerks being similar in that sort of way. That's all we get. Okay? And then Cassie starts to act very, very weirdly.
Way too close.
Another second, you would have been history.
Turning into animals kind of changes the way you see the world. Like predators and their prey. It's one thing to observe it in nature. It's a little more intense to actually live it. Makes me realize that to the Yeerks, we humans are like a rabbit is to a hawk. We are prey.
What did you notice about that scene just then? Cassie goes up to Tobias, who's up in the tree there, and she says, "Boy howdy, that was close." And then she proceeds to stare at him. She stares at him for a good long while this monologue is going on. And then she turns her head slightly and stares off into the distance robotically, and you'll notice her left eye starts twitching as well, which she probably should go to the doctor for that. But it's just so weird. She's having this monologue, but in the background, right, so I'm going to act it out for you, okay? So I'm Cassie, you're Tobias. Wow, that was a close one. Yeah, director, just try to make her start playing with the grass or something, not just staring off robotically into the distance like that. It's weird.
Will no one rid me of this turbulent hawk?
Tobias, however, gets her out of this trance by asking what's the rabbit morph for. And this is where character development should have occurred. But unfortunately, it didn't. In the book, instead of Cassie just being out in the wilderness during the middle of the day, she's in the barn wondering, because there's a fox that's been coming into her barn, and she's wondering how the fox is getting in and spooking all the animals. So she morphs a squirrel to try to find the reason for that happening. She's studying animal behaviour and trying to figure out how the animals are working. And that's when Tobias comes in and basically the same scene from there. There was a meaning behind that. Cassie is very much intrigued about animal behaviour and how animals work, how nature works. So her being inquisitive and trying to figure out why this fox is doing what it's doing is very much within the character that we're given from Cassie. But in the TV series, what's her reason for going into the rabbit morph? Oh, I just wanted to try it out and see what's her reasoning. Let's have a look.
What's with the rabbit morph?
Oh, they're quick, they dig fast, they can fit into tight places. I've been acquiring a bunch of animals. I mean, we might need them sometime.
She's been acquiring different animals because she thinks they might need them sometime. Basically, every other Animorph does this. This isn't something that Cassie specifically would do. So you're already taking out a chunk of Cassie character development just with this opening scene. Just testing out more, so that's something that Jake did in book 6, remember? Where he morphed Cockroach in the opening scene to basically test out this morph. It's not a Cassie-specific thing to do. And Cassie wouldn't just test morphs to see how good it would be at moving around like in a battle situation or hiding situation. No, she'd have a more animal behaviour reason to do it. But then, of course, just as in the books, they start to get images in their head. Except in the books, it's first just mentioned, it's just a point of conversation between Cassie and Tobias about having dreams. In the TV series, it gives us an actual example of them clutching their heads and whatever have you, which is fine. It's fine because that's what happens later on in the book. It's just taken to a more dramatic level. Here, it just gives it all bang straight away. It's fine, it's fine. But in the midst of this happening, you get like little cutscenes that are supposed to be from Axe's perspective. I'm going to play to you all those Axe visions without the Cassie interruptions in the background. Also, I think I found the thumbnail image. Here is all the Axe visions stuck together in a line. It's basically just NASA stock footage. It's no wonder they bang, 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 bang through it. They didn't want to give you time to actually think about what was being shown, but it's very clearly just images from like a satellite up in space. But it's a budget thing, so I can't be harsh on them for that. It's just interesting to point out and to put them all there. It's basically NASA stock footage. So as much as I can't blame the series for that, because it's obviously a budgetary thing, I'm not going to criticise it. There is something I can criticise. So in the books, how does Axe get to Earth? And when does he get to Earth? He and Elfangor were on the dome ship, up in orbit, and that dome ship was attacked by the Yeerks. The whole dome ship was destroyed, but Elfangor, in his little ship, managed to escape the Yeerk forces and crash land on Earth, whereas Axe was in the big dome, and because he was an Arist and the only one on board at the time, he wasn't allowed to fight, so he was sent up to the dome, which separated, and the rest of the ship got blown up, and the dome eventually got sucked into Earth's gravity and crashed into the sea. That's how Axe ended up on the planet. Something that I never really considered when previously watching the TV series is, how did Axe get to Earth? I just assumed that was a similar situation. But it's not. And that raises questions about Elfangor as well. You see, the visions that Cassie are having, and Tobias obviously, are happening in real time. How do we know that? Because as soon as it's over, we see space trails. So Axe is crash landing now, as this is going on. Which means that the dome ship thing isn't actually part of the TV series plot. It just isn't. Which makes you wonder about Elfangor, doesn't it? If you go back to episode 1 and re-listen to what Elfangor says, he says nothing about his dome ship. In fact, he says something completely different. I'm not going to cut it up and play it for you, but I'll just paraphrase basically what Elfangor said in the first episode. He was heading deliberately to Earth to warn them of the Yeerks. And you could say that's sort of what he did in the books, but he was on the dome ship near Earth. Okay, and they got attacked, he was in his fighter, he was the only one left, and he was crash landing, so he came down to Earth, and he just so happened to see the Animorphs, and thought, hold on a minute, as my last action alive, I'm going to give this race this morphing technology. It was all rather impromptu. In this, he actually names Tobias, he calls Tobias and he deliberately says, I came down to give you something. Basically from the Andalite homeworld, which is, I think that's what's implied. So it's different from the book series. Elfangor basically, on a solo mission from the Andalite homeworld, went to Earth to warn them and to give them the morphing technology. There are problems with this. It's obviously a solo rogue mission. And you could say that the TV series is basing it on, oh, he's at Tobias' father, so maybe he thought, oh, the Yeerks are going there, so I'm just going to head off on this mission to Earth. And he crash landed there. Okay. But then what does that mean about Axe? Where does that leave us with Axe? Why is he flying to Earth now? Well, we do get answers later on, but let's wait for him later on to explain that. Let's for now carry on with this episode. I mentioned earlier about taking a lot of time to get stuff done, and this scene of Cassie and Tobias seeing Axe's visions lasts almost a full minute. A bit overkill, if I might say. We have the intro segment, and we come back with Cassie and Tobias waking up. Cassie deliberately looks upward at the sky as we see this massive space trail in the distance. But apparently neither one of them sees this. Cassie was looking up like that at the sky, and she didn't see this massive green streak fluttering through the sky. Nor did Tobias, who, you know, with his hawk eyes. Neither one of them saw that. So why show us? And you know how I know they didn't see it? Because in the very next scene, they don't mention it. And they pass it off as, oh, it might have been a hallucination. Well, there is the big green streak across the sky. Why didn't you see that? If they weren't meant to see it, then why are they showing us? Are they showing us just because the person directing this just wants us to know there is something going on? It's not just a dream, don't worry, don't turn off the TV. It isn't just a dream. Is it to convince us? Because surely it'd be better to have that wondering, oh, was it actually an Andalite or something like that? No, it's just like, yeah, it's an Andalite, don't worry about it.
Maybe it was a dream. A hallucination.
That both Tobias and I felt at the same time?
Anyway, when Jake says, this must have just been a dream, and Cassie says, oh, I don't think so. Yeah, she didn't mention the green thing. But then we get Marco just cutting in out of the background, just saying, guys, where's Rachel? And Jake says, she's at her dad's for the weekend.
Hey, where's Rachel? Did anyone talk to her?
She went to her father's this weekend.
It happened right around noon. Didn't you guys feel anything?
Could you not have put that in a more appropriate place? You know, there's a big topic at hand, and then you just butt in to say, oh, exposition, by the way, Rachel's not here for this episode, at least not till the end. Yeah, just so you know, Rachel isn't here for this episode, and I have my thinking why. As soon as Jake answers this question, by the way, he goes back to the topic at hand. So the person writing this episode actually wrote, in the middle of this discussion, a line about Rachel to explain why she's not here. Why is she not there? Okay, so what's my speculation? Cassie and Rachel are basically the same character. Well, I know that. That's why I call them Casachely or Rassi. Hello, Lila. And so how do you make this a purely Cassie episode? How do you try to develop her character? Well, it's going to be a bit harder if you've got her clone, her blonde-haired clone, with her the whole episode. So they think, just clear the other one out so we can focus just on this clone today. It might make it look like she's developed more, rather than having somebody say the exact same things as her in the same episode. Because Rachel comes back at the end of the episode, she just turns up. So, that's my theory. We continue this barn scene, and it's pretty par for the course, really. Nothing much important is said. There is stuff about Cassie saying we owe it to Elfangor to find out if this is another Andalite, but yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Nothing really of note. But we then go to Visser 3 in his Yerk laboratory. This is where we see that they're talking about the Andalite disc, and Visser 3 says, "Oh, we need to find out what's on this because they are obsessed with this bloody disc." And the scientist is like, "We don't know." So Visser 3 gets angry and does this.
Humans are soft and weak.
This suits me better. Don't you agree?
Now, forgive me, I understand what the TV series is trying to do here. It's trying to make him all intimidating. But don't break Animorphs' law to do it. What's just happened? Visser 3 has gone from one morph straight into the other. Which in the main series, in the canon book series, you know, these things, that's not a thing. It's like the ultimate speed morphing. In the space of like half a second, he's gone from human to Andalite to whatever this thing is. Yeah, it looks intimidating, but that's not how it works. It does make you wonder why he doesn't do this more often. If he can just go bang straight from human to whatever this thing is, why does he only ever do it in his own laboratory when he could do it when the Andalites are around? Like later on in the episode, for example, when he finds the... Oh, I don't freaking know. We then rejoin Cassie, who's left the others in the barn and gone for a walk in the woods. It seems like she's having hallucinations again because she starts calling out to these thought-speak voices that are coming back to her quite clearly.
Where are you?
Can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you.
Please respond.
We also get a bit of foreshadowing, something that Cassie seems to do quite a lot. She dusts off her hands. You know, it's very important foreshadowing, that, her dusting off her hands, because she does it at a very important scene later. On a more serious note, this scene is very, very weird, because in the first scene, when she's hearing these voices, she's having all this head stuff, and then she does it again in a bit. But right now, she's just hearing it clearly and operating normally. You could say, and this does happen to be fair, that when she is walking through the woods here, and earlier on, that she gets flashes of images, and that's when she starts going all weird and wacky and twitchy-eyed. So there's two separate aspects to Axe's messages here. There's just the thought speak, which you can just hear clearly as if it was right freaking next to her. And then there's the migraine part, when he starts... Got the wife screaming in the other room. It's only when Axe sends visions that she starts getting the migraines. And fair enough if that's how you want to do it, TV series, it's just not explained very clearly. Axe then starts speaking in both languages, we can assume, human and Andalite, and this happened earlier in the episode as well. What strikes me as strange here is that the Andalite thought speak is based on emotions, not language, so why he's thinking to speak in two different languages is a bit weird. Also, if he is speaking in two languages, that means he's trying to communicate to those who hold that language. So he's trying to speak to Andalites by using the Andalite language. Why then is he speaking in English if he doesn't want humans to hear? Make it make sense. You know, just have him speaking in English, because then that follows the idea that it's based on emotion, so your brain translates it into the language that you want. That's how it works in the books. Don't start mixing it up. The only time where we see specific Andalite language is when it's like a noun that doesn't exist in the English language, like specific trees, where there won't be a human equivalent, so it comes across as some other weird word. But yeah, Andalites don't necessarily have their own language, really. It's all based on emotion. That's how it happens in the Elmis Chronicles. So that's canon, effectively. So him him doing the whole thing that you hear on broadcasts where it says it in one language and then repeats it in French or something. He's doing that, and it just doesn't. It's not right. But again, it's nitpicky. I will say, I'm just being me here, just being a bit nitpicky. There's a lot of worse stuff that happens in this episode, believe me. Speaking of things that are worse, notice where Cassie is while having these visions. This is where I think she should have been in the barn. So maybe the other animals have left and she's carrying on with some barn work, which apparently the show producers they just don't want to show. They just don't want to show Cassie working in the barn. For some reason, it's just not allowed. I can imagine why, because it is a bit of a stereotype for the black girl to be working on a farm. Just saying. So maybe that's why the TV producers thought, maybe we'll just stick her somewhere else. But where do they put her? They put her in woods next to a fence. And then she starts having visions of a place that's in the woods with a fence. You need the contrast, because it looks weird. It looks like she's just seeing what's in front of her. Visser 3 is also getting these hallucinations, and he starts wobbling about in his office a little bit. And you remember, again, that I talked about them dragging things out to fill the runtime. This scene of them wobbling about a bit lasts 1 minute and 30 seconds almost. It's like 1 minute 27. 1 minute and 27 seconds of Visser 3 going like that, Cassie going like that, and Axe in the background going, "It's help me." What? You don't need 1 minute 30 to do that. We've already, in this episode, we're about 7 minutes in, and we've probably wasted about 3 minutes. It's from this minute and a half of visions that Cassie sees a vision of 2 chimneys. This is the important clue she needs for the Animorphs to eventually find where Axe is located, but for now, she heads off back to the Animorphs, and they're in Siberia. She goes up to Jake and Marco and starts to talk about what she's seen. And Jake says,
Let's go somewhere quiet.
"Let's go somewhere quieter." They go sit next to the freaking counter where people buy things. Let's go somewhere quieter. Move 3 steps away. Find a cupboard somewhere, or step out into, I don't know. Go to the disabled toilets or something, I don't know.
It's like I'm seeing 2 of everything.
Like 2 sets of eyes? What, like an Andalite?
Seeing 2 of everything, Cassie. Like an Andalite, Jake. Andalites have 3 points of vision. You got the 2 main eyes, and then you got the 2 stalks that move independently. So that's 3 visions. I mean, come on, show, it's pretty basic. Get it right. Marco then asks Cassie to tell them what she saw.
So tell us what you saw.
I saw a forest and a fence.
Tell us what you saw, Cassie. I saw a forest and a fence. Where were you, Cassie? In a forest? By a fence? You know, if Jake had just asked Cassie, where were you? She would have had to have said, I'm in the forest and there was this fence there. And then you'd just say, so you just saw what was in front of you. Pretty wild dreams there, Cassie. Anyway, so in her hallucinations, she saw a fence. So Jake suddenly believes her that she saw a fence. And that's basically it. And then the TV suddenly turns on to the appropriate news station.
Officials will neither confirm nor deny the crash of an experimental military aircraft over the weekend.
Coincidentally, the TV tells them exactly what they need to hear, and then just to reassure them that activity is going on, a helicopter flies directly over Siberia. How do we know that it's a helicopter? Well, you've got the helicopter sounds in the background, but don't worry, if you don't know what a helicopter sounds like, the table is shuddering like it's a freaking earthquake. Look at the state of this. Helicopters don't... Unless the helicopter is in the room with them. Even then, it won't... Somebody is under that table giving it that. We don't need that, director. We don't need... We can hear the helicopter. We can hear it. We don't need the visual, unrealistic... If that's how much things are shaking, that's basically earthquake territory. And you wouldn't have these fumbling, bumbling idiots in the background just sort of staring up at the TV. They'll probably be like holding on to the... It's stupid. The three Animorphs head back to where Cassie just was, in the woods. Cassie says, this isn't it, there was a huge fence. Okay, so what, were you taking them back to where you just were with the fence? Or was it the other fence? And how did you know that where that was? God, you're frustrating, Cassie. Is this a Demon Cassie plot? Tobias then shows up out of nowhere, apparently having realised that something else was going on, and Jake just looks up and says, what the hell's going on? Tobias then proceeds to have a very in-character dick line.
Something definitely did crash.
Cheers, Tobias. Thanks, mate. We already saw that on the freaking TV thing. Can you use those freaking wings of yours? Fly up to the freaking sky and actually go look for something instead of sitting down here like a wazzock-faced titwonger. I mean, seriously, how much of a dick do you have to be? You could fly up and find out exactly what this crash thing is without anyone suspecting it. And what do? You stand down here like a pillock on your branch saying, something sure did crash. Go tell them what it bloody is then, you cock! And I wasn't using a sweary word, I was referring to him as a chicken, like poultry. You know, I think Hawks would find that offensive. Tobias stands back and just does nothing useful when he would be the most useful in this situation, and just lets the other Animorphs search randomly through the woods. And lo and behold, they find the mysterious fence, which is probably about 10 feet away from Siberia, apparently. Marco says, we're not getting anywhere, even though you can clearly see the facility they're aiming for next to them. But things get so desperate that Jake suggests that they split up. So what do?
Maybe we should split up.
They proceed to not split up. As what is Jake? What is he doing? What is he doing? He's the leader, isn't he? Let's go somewhere quiet. Steps 3 steps away. Let's split up. Nobody decides to split up. Tobias, can't you be useful for a change? No. No. Jake, you're letting the team down. Oh look, it's that facility we've just been walking alongside for the last 5 minutes. And then Cassie proceeds to get a migraine because she sees the chimneys. Why? Who knows? Bad timing, I guess. Hooray! We found the chimneys from the vision! These monstrosity structures that stick up vastly into the sky. If only we'd had a bird friend who could have spotted that within seconds a long, long time ago. The one who had the exact same visions as me. Cheers, Tobias. Thanks for your help, mate. You know, I think he just wanted us to get the extra fizz. Just a bit of a walk in the woods. Cheers, Tobias. Looking after our physical health. He's such a dick, isn't he? He is actually a dick. Would have taken him 2 seconds. Oh, just flap up the trees. There they are. Back, report, it's over there. No, they have to... Whatever. Might as well just not be in this bloody episode, Tobias. Also note that Cassie has to actually tilt her head to make sure it's the same chimneys she saw. Is she for real? No, those chimneys. Hold on a minute. Yep, that's definitely them. They proceed to enter the facility with a conveniently cut hole, which must have been done by an Andalite, we suspect. This must imply that Axe has left the facility or entered the facility. Does it matter? No. Upon entering the facility, they find a collection of buildings. Jake takes a look in the window of what looks like a small guardhouse and reports...
Nothing.
Damn, we must be at the wrong place. Just gave up. There's nothing here, guys. Cassie then finds some blue fur, which is clearly Andalite fur. Do you know what would be good here? I think a morph. A morph might be good here. Something like a dog, which has a great sense of smell. Do they morph? No. No, they don't. You remember that this is Animorphs, writers. You remember that this is Animorphs, right? And they're just wandering through this factory as their old selves. When, you know, they could morph and it would be easier to find what they're looking for. Oh yeah, sorry, budget, I get it. Tom and a band of fumbling, bumbling controllers then come into the scene and somehow don't see the Animorphs, when it would actually probably be harder to miss them. And it's now when we get a close-up shot of what we can assume is a Dracon beam. We can assume it's a Dracon beam. So it's got this green thing here, it's got this radar-like thing on here and a button there. And every time we've seen a Dracon beam, it has been a flashlight, or as we English would call it, a torch. So yeah, that is what we assume to be a Dracon beam, and it looks like something you buy in boxes of 20 off Amazon for 12 quid, honestly. But is it actually a Dracon beam? Because what's this little radar thing over here? What does that do? Does that help them aim? Because they clearly can't use that. But yeah, let's just assume that that's a Dracon beam. Okay. Happy with that. Then Tobias finally appears. So after mooching around for a bit and not helping anybody at all, he finally comes into action, and what does he do?
My brother's here, you know we're on the right track.
I'll follow them.
Cheers, Tobias. I mean, you wanted to do something helpful, what you're just gonna chase Tom around? You know, I would actually be a lot more lenient on you for doing this if anything came of it. But this is where you just disappear from the episode. You just vanish. I think he just goes home. He just goes home. He just sods off at this point. Thanks, Tobias. The Animorphs eventually find their way into the building and start searching for Axe. As was foreshadowed, Cassie dusts off her hands, and it's exactly this moment where she gets ambushed by Axe. Axe ambushes Cassie, and there's a bit of a standoff between him and the Animorphs, but they eventually convince him. But that's at this point where he says,
"How did you know I was here?"
I heard your thoughts. We came to help you.
"I was calling to my own kind."
See what I was talking about earlier, where he was doing the whole English and then Andalite thing? He's now saying, I was trying to contact my own kind. Well, why are you speaking in English then, you dolt? Also, you'll notice something strange. Axe is injured throughout this episode. He's limping and holding his side. You realise you can morph Axe. You've been hiding out here for probably about a day at least. At no point did you think, I'm injured, let me just speed morph like everybody else does and get rid of that injury. Why have they got him injured? Obviously he's crash landed, so it's, oh, he's injured from the crash landing. Oh, there's a problem where he should just be able to morph it off. But if he was uninjured, then he'd just be able to run around willy-nilly and we wouldn't be able to do dramatic scenes. So he must be injured. It's like in Megamorphs 2. You remember that? Megamorphs 2? When Tobias couldn't morph away his injuries? That's what's happened here. Yeah, I know. At least the books were sometimes inconsistent as well, so there's that. Unfortunately for Axe and the Animorphs, Visser 3 has also showed up and he tries to coax Axe out by pretending to be a fellow Andalite. This does work because Axe quickly limps off to find his Yerk enemy. The Animorphs can't follow Axe because he's approaching Visser 3, so Cassie has the brilliant idea of morphing into a skunk. Ah, you see, it was foreshadowed, because at the start of the episode she says, I'm trying out all sorts of different morphs, because they've all got different skills in battle and fighting and all that sort of stuff. So yes, I suppose the TV series did that bit sort of right, but you realise Jake's got a tiger morph. You realise that? It would seem a bit more appropriate. But lo and behold, the skunk morph works, even though it probably shouldn't have. So because the show has no budget, they don't use a tiger in the factory scene, and so Cassie runs up to the controllers and sprays them, allowing Axe to get away. Cassie springs into action, and Seeing this skunk, Axe suddenly decides, actually, this Andalite must be a yerk now, so I'm going to run away. To be fair, the skunk then thought speaks to him saying, "It's Visser 3! By that point, he'd already run off and he was already basically in Jake's arms. So what happened here? He ran to Visser 3 and looked like he was, getting along all right. And then a skunk shows up and it's like, right, no, sorry, I know you're a yerk now. Also, it's interesting to note that not only does skunk smell stink really bad, it also apparently blinds you, because nobody sees Axe getting whisked away by the Animorphs. With Axe now completely convinced that the Andalite he just saw isn't in fact an Andalite, the Animorphs proceed to a dead end. But before we get to that, we can't not show this bit.
Come on, let's go.
It's funny. It's actually funny. It's not meant to be, but it is, isn't it? God, this episode. But anyway, after Cassie speed morphs behind a pillar, they do find this dead end. What could they possibly do at this dead end?
It's a dead end.
It's a dead end, everyone. A corner where there's no escape and there's no further way through this passage. So stumped by this dead end, Jake decides that it's a good idea to go through the door that's at this dead end. It's not really much of a dead end, is it? There's a freaking door at the end of it that you open and walk out of. That's not a dead end! Pillocks! Oh no, it's a dead end! Quick, let's open the door of this dead end and move through to the other side. The animals proceed through this dead end door to what is actually, to be fair, a dead end. The animals move through this door and they enter this, what must be like a trash area with like bins or something, although it doesn't really make sense because it's completely enclosed, but there's a large opening at the top with all this light pouring down on them. So they're basically outside, but the only way is up, essentially. And you'll notice that there's this door that they've just come through and there's a window on it. Very important. The Animorphs go back to this door to see that the controllers are approaching. So they're obviously looking into this door and seeing what's inside. How do windows work? It's a very important question here. So the Animorphs can see into the dark room. They're in the light room. They're in the bright open air. What do the controllers see? Considering they've just come through what they appeared to think was a dead end, the controllers are now in that dead end room. And apparently they're just sort of standing around doing that for like a minute and a half to 2 minutes. And not one of them thinks to look out of the window and see 3 humans and an Andalite. Because we've established that you can see through this window. So it takes about 2 minutes to figure out, maybe we should go through the one door. Maybe that's where they went. And look, this window is now basically blocked out. And Tom looks at this window and apparently he can't see out of it. Now, how do windows work? Okay, so picture yourself in your front room, okay? And say it's dark outside and it's light inside, like you got the lights on. Who can see what? Usually it's very difficult to see outside when it's dark. You just see black. It's just you might see reflections of yourself in the window. But people standing outside would be able to see you perfectly because you've got the light on you. Okay, now picture during the day. So you're in a room without lights on, there's, ambient lighting. And then it's a bright sunny day outside. You can see outside very, very clearly. You can see all the details as if there weren't even a window there. But actually people from outside would find it a bit harder to see you because it's darker on the inside, on the other side of this glass. So take this logic and apply it to this scene, where the controllers are in a dark room and the Andalites are lit up. They're outside. The Animorphs were able to see into the dark room and see that the controllers were after them. But apparently the controllers are not able to see outside and see 3 humans and an andalite standing there. Yeah, just think about it. We have a moment where the Animorphs are trying to convince Axe to come with them, who says he's too injured and asks the Animorphs to leave him behind. It's then when we get this corker of a line.
I have no morphs that can fly. I have trouble with heights.
I have no morphs that can fly. I have trouble with heights. Yeah, it's not a great excuse, is it? This also implies that he has other morphs, which makes the fact that he hasn't morphed away his injuries even more of an issue. I also want to just say, remember we looked at the Dracon beam close up earlier. These flashlights here, you'll notice if you look closely, it is the same thing. It's got the little scope on top of it. So they're just using Dracon beams as actual flashlights now. They're multifunctional, didn't you know? It's then when Visser 3 comes along and starts to slam his tail into the bit of sheet metal beside the door. This puts a time restraint on the Animorphs. Cassie somehow manages to find a butterfly that doesn't fly away, conveniently enough. But then I suppose she is the naturey one. Is this what you consider character development show? A butterfly doesn't fly away from her. It's not great character that's basically all the character development she's had in this episode. It might as well be Rachel. Then again, I suppose the butterfly would probably fly away from Rachel. Granted. But apart from that, what has Cassie done? What that couldn't just be done by another character. But anyway, yeah, Visser 3's smashing down this bit of metal, and he puts enough holes in it that the whole structure just falls down, because that's how walls work. After somehow managing to make the sheet of metal fall off the wall by putting holes in it, Visser 3 quickly speed morphs back into human for, I suppose, budgetary reasons, and then discovers that the Animorphs have flown away in their new butterfly morphs. What was Axe's excuse for not being able to fly out of there? He didn't have a flying morph because he wasn't good with heights. What's Visser 3's excuse? He can speed morph. And maybe he's got a fear of heights as well. Somehow, though, I doubt it. Which means he hasn't got an excuse not to have a flying morph, which means he should speed morph right now and attack those butterflies. Does he? Like heck does he. Of course not. Why would he? Why would he? That would be logical. Why would he do that? Why? Show. We don't allow logic here. After escaping Visser 3, the Animorphs travel back to Cassie's barn. They discuss with Axe how he ended up on Earth, and this is where he says,
My ship was not prepared for your atmospheric conditions.
The ship was not prepared for the atmospheric conditions. You'd think that was pretty important when it came to space travel. It's like saying, well, I was flying a plane and it crashed. Why did it crash? Well, it just wasn't prepared for a runway. Why did you crash on that road? I just don't know how to operate the brakes. What is this? Not prepared for the atmospheric conditions. Then what the hell are you doing? Why are you here? Why did you travel, apparently on this solo mission, which, again, we will talk about, if you don't know how to bloody land the thing? It's like, I don't know, 18-year-old human elf Angor travelled in his car and goes off to Lincolnshire. And little 12-year-old Aximili decides to take his mum's car. I'm going to chase my brother! And then just crashes into a wall. What are you doing? What are you doing? Not prepared for atmospheric conditions. With what you didn't expect atmospheric conditions, is that it? You just expected to hang around in space for the rest of your life? Codswalloper. Also take note that even though he's just morphed to and from Butterfly, he is still injured apparently. I think they've just forgotten how morphing works already in this series, haven't they? He should be fine now. He should be absolutely dandy. But no, apparently not. Apparently this is Megamorphs 2 now. Also, notice how he pronounces Nothlit.
Tobias, you went over the 2-hour limit.
Anonymous. That's what we call such a one.
They can't even get Nothlit right. For some reason Axe pronounces it Nothlith. It's Nothlit. Nitpicky, I know, but it's at the point now it's just frustrating. It's It's like... what is it like? It's like you're producing an amateur play and the main actor comes out with his shoes on his hands. You think, yeah, it's nitpicky, but just... Are you that dumb? Are you that dumb, fam? Put your shoes on your freaking feet, man. It's basic stuff. Axe then insists that he gets taken to Elfangor, his brother. Of course, the Animorphs don't know that he is Elfangor's brother yet, but regardless, they have to inform him that Elfangor died.
He cannot be dead.
It was a warrior's death. He fought Visser 3 to the very end.
This is quite a curious line, and this is more talking about the book series now, not necessarily criticising the TV series for this. Well, there is sort of an implied criticism. In the books, they always talk about how Elfangor was murdered by Visser 3. Here, and I think in the books sometimes as well, it said that he had a warrior's death. Those are two very distinct things, a warrior's death and a murder, aren't they? Think about it, okay? I mean, I could, if you think I'm wrong, please do explain and I'll consider it. But from what I'm looking at now, a warrior's death is during a fight. Like it's an even playing field and you're in the midst of fighting and you get killed. Murder is where that's not the case and you basically like... How do I say it? Basically, a warrior's death is you die in a war scenario. And that is different to murder, because you don't murder people in a war scenario when you're fighting on different sides. You know, in the trenches in the First World War, they weren't just murdering each other. It was, they were fighting, they were in the midst of a war, so it didn't count as murder. So which is it? Was Elfangor murdered, or did he die a warrior's death, where he was fighting to the bitter end? Because in that case, that's not murder, that's wartime killing. Murder's different, so... Animorphs in general, book series and TV series, which is it? Was he murdered or was it a warrior's death? Depends on what... It seems to depend on what perspective you're talking from here. Because if you're trying to big up Elfangor, you said, oh, he fought a war, it was a warrior's death. But if you're trying to criticise the Yeerks and Visser 3, it was, oh, he was murdered, the Yeerks murdered him. It just seems to be very pick and choose depending on the scenario. Upon hearing about Elfangor's death, Axe just runs off. He just runs away. The Animorphs follow, slowly, and eventually find him in the woods, where he's clearly upset. Axe informs that he shouldn't have come, and that Elfangor had told him to stay back, which adds further questions. It's quite a good scene here where they have quite a touching introductory moment where they actually finally start to get to know each other and they join forces. And there's some good stuff from Axe here as well, especially when he morphs to human. And then Rachel shows up. she's just wandering the woods. She's just out there in the woods, wandering about. Was it so... Right. So, if she's walking in the vicinity of the barn and she's trying to find the others, did she just sort of like catch a glance of them in the woods? In which case, the security's not great. Any average Joe could be walking past and say, what the bloody hell is that they're talking to in there? That's the only reasonable explanation for Rachel just suddenly showing up out of nowhere. Unless she was actually just wandering the woods behind Cassie's barn, which, quite frankly, would be an interesting plot twist. It's here where we get the Frollis manoeuvre. So, without permission, I hasten to add, Axe acquires all of their DNA and turns into Paolo Costanzo. Paolo Costanzo is one of the best bits about the Animorphs TV series. His impersonation of an Andalite pretending to be human is grand. I think it does bring about some hilarious stuff. He does a cracking job of it. This is the best part of the episode by a country mile. But then he gets on his knees to pledge his loyalty to Jake, which isn't something Andalites do. So why is he doing it, show? Why is he getting on his knees to pledge loyalty? Andalites like bow with their upper bodies. They don't get on their knees. Not from what we know. Again, I know it's nitpicky, but there's so many bits like this that it all adds up. And it just becomes clear that nobody was really paying that much attention to the books. It was like very superficial level stuff. And it just doesn't feel like there's somebody who is in tune with the Animorphs series behind this. So Axe pledges loyalty and says he would fight by Jake's side until the Yeerks were destroyed, and it all ends happily ever after, and they wander off back into the woods. Cassie gives a spiel about opening your heart and friends will help you through things, which doesn't really seem that applicable in the episode because she didn't really open her heart to Axe. They basically just said, "Hi, do we fight the same enemy? Yeah, sure thing, mate. Let's do it." There wasn't really much soul searching going on here, or, you know, I don't know. It just seems a bit wet, doesn't it? And speaking of things that just seem slightly irrelevant, the episode ends with this butterfly flying across the screen, as if it had a major part to play in the episode. This would have been much more suitable to The Stranger. You remember book 7, The Stranger? I forget if it actually goes by the same name in the TV series, but there was the whole conversation of a butterfly flapping its wings and causing changes here, there and everywhere. That would be a much more suitable ending in that, where you talk about butterflies flapping their wings causing big changes. Here it's just, oh, they morphed a butterfly at one point, so we finished the episode with a random butterfly flying across the screen. It's just a bit naff, isn't it? So that is the end of the episode, and it certainly pales in comparison to the book. I think you'll be inclined to agree. But before we finish up this episode, there's a couple of big things we need to discuss, and we're going to start looking at the Andalite situation. In the book, it was the dome ship, and we've discussed it. Dome ship in space, outside of Earth, gets blown up, and the only survivors are Elfangor and Axe. One crash lands in the construction site, the other into the bottom of the sea, and eventually gets rescued from there. That was good. It worked really well, largely. And in this TV series, it's a bit different, because there is no dome ship. That's not a thing. It happened in a completely different and, might I say, a bit more rubbish way. So this is what I get happened from the TV series and what information we get. One day, on the Andalite homeworld, Elfangor turns around and says, "You know what? I'm going to warn the people on Earth about the Yeerks." So he gets on his ship and flies down to Earth, where eventually he just crash lands because he's an idiot. Oh, by the way, Axe crash landed as well, so I think it runs in the family. You know, just don't let any of this family near a freaking Andalite craft, because they'll just crash it. But yeah, he flies down deliberately to Earth with the sole intention of giving the power to morph to his son, because he mentions Tobias by name in that first episode. So it was very deliberate on his behalf, whereas in the book series, it's not deliberate, it is impromptu, because you remember in the book, instead of just saying, "Here's the morphing device," he hesitates, thinks, and tells them about the technology that's in his ship still, and Jake goes in to grab it, and he says, "I'm going to die, but take this, it's all I have," effectively. In the TV series, he comes out of his ship and pulls the Esquivel device out of his ass and hands it to the Animorphs, as if it were a deliberate, that's what his intention was. So it can't have been approved by the military for a start, so he's just gone on this rogue mission to break Ciro's kindness, deliberately. That's what Elfangor does in the TV series. And then the Axe thing, he just, a few days later, decides, actually, I'm just going to follow my brother to Earth to break the law with him. And he's a kid, so what pillock in their right mind thought, yeah, alright, you go do that mission? Did he steal a fighter and fly after Elfangor? And then, just like his brother, crash land like a complete dick in some construction site? I mean, what's more convincing, the book version of this or the TV series? Clearly the book series did this better, because it's just a mess what they've done in the TV series. You know, just Andalites on their own, just deciding, right, we're going to fly off to this other planet now. And we don't even see that's the thing, in the TV series, we don't see an Andalite military, do we? There is no military hierarchy that we ever see. So they might as well just be, like, on their own all the time. They might as well be like a solitary species. They don't live in groups. They just do their own thing at any given time. And then that brings the question of what's happened to Axe's ship? Was it just destroyed beyond repair? Was it in that factory? It must have been near that factory site. We did see the hole in the fence, but it was never explained whether the ship landed inside that area or outside. Where's the ship? It's just gone. Just don't worry about it, apparently. You know, all that alien technology that's just sitting there. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So yeah, that's a complete mess. Let's talk about Tobias. Another complete mess. And a bit of a dicky mess as well. What an absolute codswalloper he is. What an absolute smegpot. What did he do in the earlier episode? All he had to do was find 2 freaking chimneys that he saw in his vision. And he's just like, nah, mate, you go do it. You know, I can fly, you know, and see for miles, a much better vision than you. I can go up in the sky and see anything you want me to see. Am I going to do it? Nah, sod you. I don't get paid enough for that. What a colossal, naughty word. And then when they were in the site, he says, I'm going to follow Tom. And then just disappears, and we don't see him again. You know, he could have been a bit more helpful. He just could have been more helpful in any way. He just did nothing. You know, he was supposed to be one of the ones having the visions at the start. You'd think he'd show a bit more urgency, a bit more willingness to actually do something of use. But no. Tobias is basically detrimental to the team at this point. Remember, he basically abandoned them in episode 2, and eventually came back saying, oh, I'm a bird now. Sorry, you know, what rotten luck. Then he tried to give Rachel a heart attack in the previous episode, and was basically useless there as well. He did fight off the 4 controllers in the woods in the last episode though, to be fair to him, but apart from that, he has just been a detriment to the team in every possible regard. He almost killed Cassie at the start of this episode as well, by the way. And then finally, Cassie. What character is there? You had the perfect opportunity at the start of this episode to build her character. With the whole fox in the barn thing. You know, maybe change it around a bit. Maybe don't actually show a fox, but you can still have the lines there. It's not that difficult, but nah. Just take that away. We don't have time in this episode to do character development. No, we got to do 1.5 minutes of Cassie going, Aah! And Vista3 going, Aah! You got to have 1.5 minutes of that. We can't fit 1 or 2 lines of character development in here. She might as well have been Rachel. And that is genuine. That is, well, maybe not genuinely, but part of me does think that they just got rid of Rachel because they thought, basically they're the same character, so we need to just sort of get rid of one if we want to develop this one. Because remember that the last episode was Rachel's episode, and I don't think Cassie even appeared in that episode. Did she? No, I don't think she did. I don't think she was in the last episode when it was Rachel's development episode. There you go. Proof's in the pudding. When they try to develop Rachel or Cassie, they have to strategically push the other one aside because they know that they're basically the same character. And you know what? That is where the TV series fails. Look at the books. They are on the opposite end of the character spectrum, Rachel and Cassie. They are like polar opposites. And yet in the series, they're the same. Do you not see the issue there, TV series, where that is the big problem? Jake shows no leadership ability. Hey gang, let's split up. Gang? Marco tells his jokes here and there, but in the book series at this point, he'd be saying, let's not do this mission, let's not do this mission, I don't want to do this. But no, he just tells jokes now, he's just comic relief and nothing more. Tobias is a dick. I mean, he's got the most development, but in a really negative way. Yeah, there's just no character. There is no character. Isn't that right, Lila? And this, I think, is where the TV series really fails. It just does not bother to develop its characters. They're just grey blobs. And they don't morph either. You had the whole bit in the factory where all they need, just get the golden retriever that the TV series has got and send it around the factory, being Jake. It would have been useful there. That's, you know, logic. We want to sniff something out, use a dog. Instead, they just wander around as themselves. Yeah, dee. Oh, hope we don't get spotted by my brother who's walking around here as well. I don't think a morph would solve that problem, apparently. Oh, it's just a mess. This is an awful episode, isn't it, Lila? Lila. An awful, awful episode. I'm tempted to say that this is the worst one so far. The only saving grace this episode has is that it introduces Axe. and that's important. If it weren't for that, this episode would be stinker. Absolute stinker. But my highlight of this episode is Cassie hallucinating visions of a fence in a forest while standing next to a fence in a forest. That is just... that's hilarious. It's actually funny. Oh dear. What an episode. What an absolute... I will actually say it's probably the worst episode. I mean, you had On the Run, but that had its charm. Boris Cabrera had some good moments in there. It had some silly moments, and... no, this one's worse. I'm sorry, it's dreadful. In every way, it's bad. They just can't even get the basics right. Anyway, that's episode 6, The Message. And tune in next time. Give me your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to become a member of the channel if you want to see videos early. I'll typically try to get 5 or 6 videos members only before they get actually finally released. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I shall see you, well, we will see you somewhere else in the Animorphs universe. Ta-ra!